benign materials can actually help you out in the long run. I mean, you know, say you want to paint an alien that when it's ready to attack, it has like these frills on the side of its neck or something, and they come up and you can see light passing through them, and it's just kind of, or you want to paint a giant dragon and it spreads its wings. These are the same principles that are happening when light is shining into the wings, and you can kind of see a little bit of that blood or the veins kind of, you know, working through. And so I noticed with, you know, again, from observation, and anytime you're going to paint something, you know, it's good to look up reference. It's preferable that you look up reference. But um, what I've noticed with these like matte, gummy kind of materials is you get the surface that's in the light is usually less. I mean, depends on your light source, but it's usually less intense than your shadow side. Usually. So don't take my word for it, but you should go out and observe it. It works in this instance. There might be lighting scenarios where it doesn't work as well. But as the light passes through, you get this really rich kind of, it almost looks like the image is inverted. You get this really rich like shadow area because all the light is pooling and concentrating at the bottom of this kind of orange gummy sphere. And again, that's that subsurface scattering where the light penetrates the surface and starts scattering around in there, and you kind of get this, it's almost like a glow. And then when on top of that you layer the bounce light, you get some really cool effects. So yeah, I mean, it doesn't seem exciting painting these spheres, but you know, there have been paintings where I had to sit down and kind of figure out, okay, well, I know this is going to be this material and this is going to be that material, and it's so much simpler to figure out, you know, how a material is going to react to light if you're not worried about all these complex forms and shapes. Because sometimes it just gets to be too much, and when something becomes too complicated, you start simplifying, and it just becomes too overwhelming. It's like if you're you know, trying to keep count of too many things, you're going to lose count of something, unless you're super awesome at counting. So I think we're going to move on to the last material for this demo, and that'll be kind of like a pure, like a glass, like a blown glass kind of material. And frankly, this is something that I don't paint too much of. I mean, yeah, you'll paint it in windshields or, um, gosh, or more windshields, or glass orbs or stuff like that. And I guess, you know, it's just one of those things. Depending on the quality of the glass, the color of the glass, or minute color particles that are in there, you could get varying results. And you'll notice in the file that I've actually arranged this one slightly differently. I'm still trying to figure it out at this point. But what's going to happen is I'm going to create a group, and I'm going to apply the clipping mask to the group. So I just turned on the selection because I couldn't see. And for this material, I think, you know, sometimes it's better to work from the light into the dark, and just kind of adding a little bit of a bloom to that light. And now I'm creating a multiply layer, and I was just picking a color. If you notice, sometimes, I mean, just looking in like a mirror in a bathroom, I remember one time I did a painting, and I was kind of stuck on what I should paint, so I just painted the bathroom, and I ended up painting the, you know, part of the mirror, and I noticed that the mirror had a had an element, like a little tinge of kind of this turquoise, like a slightly, everything was slightly in the greener blue family. Um, so I'll probably make an adjustment later on. Again, I didn't really have reference up while I was painting these. I kind of wanted to, sometimes I can get in the way. You look at reference, while you're talking about something and you're just kind of copying, or not copying, but you're analyzing the reference and not so much analyzing what needs to happen, which is kind of what these demos are more about. They're more to get you to think about how light is interacting with the surface, and maybe pique your curiosity a little more. I'm kind of it's a translucent material, and so the light is going to pass completely through it. It's going to get occluded somewhat, usually around the corners, and adding in that little bounce light. But what happens is that if you think about it, there's a sphere and then there's a light source. And if the sphere is made of glass, the light can easily pass through, the glass. It's the same thickness all the way around. But what's happening is as that sphere is turning away from the light source, as it's kind of getting closer to the edge, the light has to pass through more material, and so light is absorbed slightly more. So that's why you look at, like, if you put a glass bottle or anything on the table and you put a light there, you're going to notice that there is slightly an outline. What I just added was kind of what I was talking about earlier, is a caustic kind of light in the shadow, where it's that principle of, you hold up that magnifying glass to a light or to the sun, and it creates a concentrated beam. It's kind of focusing those light rays. Again, people will see this, and I may not be super accurate with my depiction of it, but I think, in painting, it's more about symbolically putting down marks that make people think, oh, this is glass. Like that caustic is probably most likely not correct. Maybe it should be smaller or whatever, but because I have a caustic there, because I have enough suggestions about what that material is, people will kind of get the idea. And yeah, one of the last steps, I just added a little bit more turquoise to it. Probably should have added it to the cast shadow. But yeah, so that's kind of like my material demo. Yeah, super fun stuff. Hopefully you guys will have a lot of fun with it. Um, So before I send you guys on your way to do your homework, I wanted to just talk about the sphere might be a little confusing when you get to the shinier materials. And you'll notice that the reflection warps along the bottom. The end of whatever plane this is doesn't go all the way to the horizon. So it's kind of dipping down a little. You see this, if we imagine that this is on like a table or something, this is the edge of the table away from us. Same thing here. Even a little bit on the clear translucent glass. Even on the foil, you can kind of see that there's a little bit of an ellipse, and so that's because we're seeing slightly above it. So just kind of going back into a demo, I've got there's arrows going all the way around this, and that's the incoming light rays, and then they'll be reflecting off. And it's the same principles we were talking about before, where the angle of incidence equals the angle of reflection. But what's happening is that angle is being bent, or that surface is being bent, so there's just all these tiny little lines coming off, all these tiny little normals that are 90 degrees or perpendicular to the surface. So it is taking a flat image, oops, it's taking a flat image and if this image, was to go up higher or infinitely higher, what's happening is this image is kind of, this is reflecting that, this is that. So you're getting this image is actually being distorted, okay? And it's being distorted not only in, vertically, but also horizontally. So I'm just going to go over that real quick with this demo. You guys don't have to do a chrome sphere, but if it helps, great. You don't have to include it. If you do, that's fine. Just more stuff to talk about. So let's kind of think our way through this. So let's start with the the light source. Okay, so we have the light source, as we did in our others. It's right about there. Okay, and I created another layer because we're being all fancy. So the next thing I would do is, let's figure out because it's a reflection, we're not going to see much of the shadow in this case. Let's put the cast shadow in there, actually. Good call for any of you thinking of that. Again, the easiest way to do these cast shadows is to kind of, since we're going to lock the transparency, oops. So we're just going to transform it, or I'm just going to transform it because I'm a cheater, at least on this part. Yeah, kind of sort of works for me. I'm not gonna mark you down if your cast shadows aren't. I'm not gonna mark you down. Period. I'm not gonna get on your case if your cast shadows aren't lined up perfectly. I mean, it's not really what this class is about. It's more about, especially this section. It's more about the material. I'm more concerned about what's happening up here. I'd like you to get this, somewhat reasonably right, the cast shadow, but for me, that's not going to break, it's not going to break the whole image. So if you're spending way too much time on the cast shadow, and in truthfulness, you should be, just do one, copy it. But if you're spending too much time on the cast shadow, spend more time up here, because this is where the money's at. I'm going to lock the transparency on that. So let's what's happening with the reflection. Let's get in here. We're going to have, so basically the surface of this is kind of like, if you look at a globe, and you have all the, the vertical lines, longitudinal lines, and the latitude lines. This is kind of similar, and so we're going to take the environment that's around it and kind of map it on there. Hopefully better than these lines. But this is kind of the idea that this is actually a straight line. So any straight line reflected that's perpendicular to this is going to follow this curvature. Okay? So that's why in the other examples, we see this curvature because we're slightly above these spheres, or at least the reflection doesn't go all the way to the horizon line. So, all right, so we're going to take all the information from all sides and kind of map it onto the surface. So the thought process for that is, we have our highlight layer. Let's start adding on some of this color. Now we're willing to say that this ground plane has a definite end. It's not going on to infinity. So we kind of have this in mind for the sphere. So what I'm going to do is just kind of, I like this reflection, this color of the reflection. So I'm just color picking the point that I like. And so kind of something along those lines. It is slightly, it may not be, well, if we follow our guide that we set up, I should probably, we'll notice that it's wrapping around the corner, so it is kind of coming up. It's following that ellipse line. And if it helps you to put in a guide, by all means. I'm not going to say no, don't use help. It's all about, getting the right image. So now we have, I put in a really dark blue. Maybe it was a little too dark, but what I am going to do now is we're going to try and put in some of this fill. And you'll notice that I'm leaving the area directly around that light, leaving that a little darker. Just because it helps, it makes that light feel a lot brighter. And I may not leave it that dark, but I will kind of, for the purposes of this demo, I will leave it just slightly darker. You'll notice if you look at a chrome sphere in outside, you'll get this like dark halo effect, and that's actually because the higher up in the sky, the blue just gets richer at the apex. So I'm kind of simulating that, and maybe it may not work for this situation, but again, we're not going for 100% reality. We're going for believability. And so I am, what I'm doing here is I went back into the reflection layer and kind of just, I soften the edge a little. And what I'm going to do is, again, we're painting this like it's inside, but sometimes we can mess with things to push the illusion. It's kind of like caricaturing a material, like when you caricature a face. You draw somebody and you push the elements that make that person that person. So if they have a really definitive nose, you paint the nose. And so in this case, I'm actually going to play with possibly putting in a horizon line, which I'm going to do on a separate layer. Again, it's still following somewhat this contour. So as long as we're kind of mimicking the environment around it and following the contour, we're going to get something reasonably believable. So we have a slightly lighter band right there. I'm going to move this color up a little. The reflection layer. Oops. Again, I think one of the most important things, if you're not doing a horizon or you're not doing an edge that is strictly straight across like that, you want to make sure that it is kind of suggesting the form uh, of the sphere, so that it's wrapping slightly around. Again, this isn't the prettiest sphere, but it's doing its job. It's not the prettiest chrome. I'm sure there's people out there that can paint chrome spheres. I'm positive that there are people out there that can paint chrome spheres immensely better than this. So we have that going. Now let's address like we've done on the others, the absence of one light, being the cast shadow on this, is the presence of another. I'm kind of, you might see me do this a bit more, but I am mixing in a little bit of the ground color, or the light coming off of the ground with the fill light in the background. I'm going to put a little bit of a contact shadow. Now, I'm going to go back in to the sphere, and I'm going to put a little ambient occlusion at the bottom of this. Just a little bit, and you'll see why in a sec. I'm actually trying to, there's a little portion of this that's a sliver that's catching the reflection, or this is basically the reflection of the shadow. So it's not really ambient occlusion as it is a reflection of its own shadow. I've probably played it up a bit, but again, look up here, and it's believable, and that's what we're going for. This isn't, photorealism is a whole different thing, and I find people interchange that word with rendered and photoreal, but personally, I think that they're two completely different disciplines. Photorealism, you're really trying to capture the reality down to the pixel, whereas rendering, you may be rendering down to the pixel, but you're still trying to capture the impression. So that is looking fairly decent. And you'll notice that I mean, let's try it. Let's put a shadow side on there and see what happens. Well, first of all, you're kind of it's kind of breaking a rule right there, or not a rule, but it's kind of defying what this material is. If we put a form shadow like we've done on most other ones, we're saying that this is the light is hitting this side and it's not able to reach around the other side, which is true. This light can't reach here, but because this is such a reflective material, the light hitting this is bouncing back to here, and the difference in value is fairly negligible, if at all. So it really does end up looking more like this, so we don't really get a form shadow. You could have a slightly reflective material, but for the most part, I would stick closer to this. And you'll see that on these demos, it's basically the same thing. One difference is that I'm playing up a darkness around the highlight, whereas here I'm playing up a lightness, and that's the idea of there's a clear coat. Probably be easier if I explain this visually. This is basically um, this is basically a mirror, and there's a very, well, first of all, it's reflecting all the light. It's not really absorbing much. Light is coming in, bouncing off. When you have a material that has like maybe like a car, there's a clear coat, and then you'll have a surface, you'll have a clear coat, and then there will be multiple layers uh, of paint underneath. And that's why, if you've seen people painting cars and stuff, they, multiple coats. That's what they're saying. And so it's building up this kind of just sheet after sheet of color. And so what happens is in those other instances with the red, the light comes in and it hits here, and so you get a bright reflection. You get the highlight happening right here. But light is also kind of bouncing around in here. And so you kind of get a little cross between a shiny and a little bit of subsurface scattering because it's just bumping up those colors. And so that is why on these two, slightly different from the chrome, we have a halo of slightly brighter colors. Okay? So hopefully that'll clear up some questions. Again, we're not worried about cylinders, cones, anything like that. We're just trying to get, I'm trying to get your feet wet with materials. And I find it, this is one of the simplest shapes to do materials on, because it just does a lot of, the form does a lot of suggestion for you. So your homework for this week will be basically your version of this. There should be at least 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 materials. Okay? A matte surface, a shiny surface, possibly utilizing a little bit of like a clear coat with paint underneath, so you get that halo effect. A crumpled metal, a skin texture, a candy texture, kind of like a hard candy, translucent, a gummy candy, and then a clear glass. And again, look up reference. You don't have to be painting these right out of your head. We could just look up gummy bears. You could do an image search for gummy bears. Or one thing I find is if you type in the word macro, meaning macro photography, you might get some close-ups, and you might be able to get some really cool details that you can implement into your studies. Also, let's see, hard candy macro. We'll try clear candy. And I would, create a folder of reference, because, you may not end up painting a whole bunch of candy in the future, but who's to say that, there's not attributes that you'll want to like translate into something else, like a monster, or, what happens if a monster has like slightly translucent skin, or, some other kind of cool element that you haven't seen in a creature before. Yeah, sometimes, anytime you type up candy, you'll get a lot of makeup and nail polish and other things. But even, this could be great reference for just for your glass version. You can make it slightly opaque, but these are still pretty clear. There's little marbles. So yeah, just look those up. and look up, use some of the keywords that we talked about, like subsurface scattering. You're going to probably get a lot of 3D because it's big in 3D, but this is, 3D does it fairly accurately. But I would suggest, trying to get real, real reference, not 3D reference. But still, this is, it shows how the light is still, the material is translucent here, and then it becomes thicker on this side, so less light is passing through. So use Google, and oh, that's awesome. It's small, but this kind of shows you, well, what's happening and how certain pieces, there's more material and then less material, and the light is able to pass through. So yeah, just don't try and come up with all this stuff out of your head. I know I say that, and I went and did it, but again, I've been working on materials for a while, and so it's kind of like I wouldn't say it's second nature, but I have a basic understanding of it, which gets me by. But I'm always looking at reference. I'm constantly opening up a good. If we go candy macro. Or if we type in translucent candy macro. So again, just try and find good reference, and try and see if you can extrapolate the information. That's kind of, that's really cool. I mean, sorry about that, but sometimes these reference photo sites will give you really good stuff, but I mean, all the little bubbles in there, there's even a crack, and I mean, sometimes you'll have to deal with things in your reference that you don't want. But oh, that's awesome. These are kind of like marbles, but you can even see like sorry, I'm getting all excited. You can even see like a change in texture. You can see the reflections. Yeah, just really neat stuff. So, I mean, take the time. The actual painting, if you have the right reference, the actual painting won't take you a long time. It'll actually be really quick because you're just kind of, that's cool. You're just kind of looking at reference and trying to capture it. And we're not using a lot of custom brushes or anything. We're just using airbrush for the most part. So yeah, we'll try one more, and I would suggest maybe try clear coat. Clear coat paint maybe. So we can kind of see, that it's reflecting the sky. There's a really rich red. And you can make these any color that you want, just as long as you're kind of sticking to, you're trying to pick up the qualities of the material. Yeah, I mean, this is a really like beautiful example of that that color. I mean, it just. I'm guessing this guy paid a lot of money for his for his paint job. Yeah, we can look in here. So yeah, just look up the reference. Pick any color you want, but I mean, mainly you should try and get to the point where other people can tell what the material is. And again, just worry about the sphere. Don't get wrapped up with too many different shapes or try and make a face or anything like that. Just keep it to a sphere. Keep it simple. It's all about the material and the interaction of the material with light. And with that, I say good luck, and I'll see you guys next time.